Welcome to ZKast, everybody. I'm Z.S. Caravallo from ZK Research, and I'm back for another one of my thought leadership videos. These are when I interview interesting people from the industry to talk about hot topics. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank my media partner, eWeek, and this is done, every ZKast is done in conjunction with eWeek as part of their eSpeak series, so thanks to eWeek. I'm delighted to welcome Craig Connors. You're the VP of Service Provider and Edge BU at VMware. Craig, that's kind of a long title. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is and what you do at VMware?
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So thanks for having me. As the CTO for Service Provider and Edge BU, I manage our SD-WAN and SASE and Edge Compute offerings, as well as helping to enable our service providers in delivering those offerings to their end customers.
Okay, well, great. I'm glad you're doing SASE and SD-WAN because the topic is SASE. Now, SASE stands for Secure Access Service Edge. It seems like it's the thing everybody's talking about today. I know there's a lot of vendors that actually use the term, and they come from all different angles. But what does SASE mean to you, and how is VMware different in this market?
Yeah, so to me, SASE is the convergence of networking and security in the cloud. We have some unique requirements that have evolved, especially in the last year and a half, in terms of the way we have to secure our networks and our applications. And so SASE brings that together by distributing cloud points of presence close to the users and bringing their networking connections into those points of presence and centralizing the security operations there. In terms of differentiation for VMware, we're very fortunate that our VMware SD-WAN is based on the VeloCloud technology, who was the pioneer in cloud-delivered SD-WAN. And so this notion of a distributed set of points of presence, this notion of centralizing compute near the users, giving them a centralized on-ramp to cloud and SaaS, we were one of the early adopters in that model of delivery. And so for us, it's simply layering security on top of that offering we already had today.
Yeah, I will say that I've been following VMware a long time, and you guys have done a really nice job broadening your network and security portfolio. In fact, I remember when you got into networking through the Nicira acquisition, if you look back at whatever, it was a little critical of VMware, thinking you weren't really ready to be a network vendor. And granted, you had some bumps along the way. You've come a long way since then, so it's impressive to see what you guys have built. Now, the concept of cloud security I find fascinating because I've been an analyst now since 2001. You can see the gray hairs here. The very first report I wrote as an analyst was on the concept of cloud-based security delivered from a product then known as IP service switches, if you remember the cosigns and Shastas and those types of products. And it never took off, right? There was no demand for it back then. But today, and now granted, those were hardware platforms, very expensive. It didn't have the agility that software platforms like yours does. But there is this big demand for SASE. Every customer I talk to, that's the first thing they ask about. So what are your customers asking for? What's driving this need for SASE today?
Yeah, I mean, look, the pandemic is the elephant in the room, and I'll get to that in a second. But that's really not the main driver here. I think there are three things that have been happening over the past few years. One is that the data center is moving. Folks are moving applications from their data center to cloud, to SaaS, to infrastructure as a service, running in hyperscalers. And so applications are no longer sitting in one central place. The second thing is that with modernized applications and microservices and Kubernetes, even a single application might not sit in one place. It could be striped across multiple clouds. We could have the data store in one location and the compute sitting somewhere else. And the third thing is that users are distributing. Folks are working remote. Folks are on the road. And so now this notion of having a perimeter around my network and securing that perimeter and treating everything inside the perimeter as safe, well, that doesn't work anymore because there is no perimeter. The apps are everywhere. The users are everywhere. Oh, and by the way, folks are bringing their own devices to work. And we have this whole set of emerging threats that are coming at the same time, where the rise of cryptocurrency leads to the rise of ransomware attacks. And so all of these things coming together, distributed workforce, distributed applications, emergence of new threats, they forced us to rethink the way that we applied security techniques. And that's where SASE came from. And now with the pandemic, that got accelerated like a rocket ship. And what we saw as folks went and worked from home, IT teams did kind of heroic job of pivoting using existing remote access technology to get users connected. But now, you open a pretty big security hole when you say, I'm going to send 20,000 employees home. And as soon as they connect their VPN, they can access everything in my company. And that's when people started reaching in and exploiting vulnerabilities, and some of these ransomware attacks came out, right? Because now all I have to do is compromise one user and I can get access to everything. So that really shined a light on this pivot towards SASE, this pivot towards zero trust, which is a foundation that SASE is built upon. And how do I secure the user and the application end to end and give this sort of least privileged set sort of access where users can only access the things that they really need to.
Yeah, I think the salient thing that you said, though, was that if applications are everywhere and users are everywhere and devices are everywhere, then I need a model where security is everywhere. Because
Right.
the old model, I had security centralized, and that worked if my devices, users, and applications were centralized. But that's no longer the case. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, that's definitely a huge part of it. I think the other thing is with these, emerging complex threats that we're seeing, in order to catch things on 0 day, we're doing things like sandboxing and remote browser isolation and the network threat analytics using machine learning. And those things require a lot of compute power. And so even if I could send a firewall to everyone's house, I can't send 50 servers to everyone's house to build an RBI cluster, right? So to be able to take advantage of cloud computing and also bring it closer to the users, those two things coming together is really what we have.
I think the firewall vendors would like if you sent a firewall to everybody's house, though. So now there's a term that VMware uses, and I've noticed a few other vendors use it, and that's intrinsic security. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's obvious what that means. So can you describe what intrinsic security means?
Yeah, I mean, intrinsic security means having the security built into your product sort of seamlessly, right? So traditionally, again, going back to that, I have a perimeter, I secure a perimeter. I have products I deliver for serving applications. I have products I deliver for connecting to the network, and I have products I deliver for security. And they're all different, right? But now that users and apps are spread out and we need to do this sort of end-to-end security approach, I really need security to be a part of the remote access and a part of application delivery and a part of networking and a part of everything that's going on, right? So intrinsic security is, how do I integrate the security technologies into every aspect between the user and the device, the network and the application, so that in an adaptive, seamless way, I'm providing that security experience to my users.
Yeah, because that's an interesting way to put it, because I think one would argue we had integrated security before, but it was kind of sheet metal integration almost. We had multiple functions in a box, but that didn't really allow us to get things everywhere. We just resided things in different locations. And what you're talking about is actually being able to take that capability and spin it up and deliver everywhere a user is easily, right? And that's one of the big differences.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be common to have one vendor for remote access and one vendor for sandboxing and one vendor for firewall and one vendor for IDS, IPS. And if I was securing 2 data centers, maybe that was practical. But when I'm securing 20,000 remote users, I can't have them ping-ponging between 5 different clouds. I can't be monitoring 20,000 users' data out of 5 different clouds. And so building that integrated intrinsic solution is really important for us to scale.
Yeah, I will say one of the lessons I think that's come away from the pandemic and this shift to intrinsic security is I was talking to a CTO a few months ago, and he was telling me that he understands now that trying to have best of breed security everywhere doesn't lead to best in class threat protection. In fact, it works against it, right? Because as you mentioned, if I'm ping ponging between all these sites trying to keep policies up to date, even if I could throw 1 million people at the problem, I still can't do it.
Yeah, it can be really hard to maintain consistency, right? And a word, anytime you hear me talk, you'll hear me say consistency a lot, because I want that user, whether they're at home or they're in a Starbucks or they're in an airport or they're in the office to have a consistent security experience. And it should be easy for my security team to provide that and enforce that. And if I have to jump console to console, if I have to normalize policies across multiple different policy stores, then I'm making it more challenging for my security team. So to your point, even if each of those products is the best at what they do, you can inadvertently create security holes just by having inconsistencies in configuration and access.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because there is the people side and the technology side. Now, I did notice that VMware recently announced its Secure Web Gateway, also known as a SWIG, because in the tech industry, you have to acronize everything, right? So for now, I'm sure most people know what a SWIG is, but for those that don't, can you just tell us what a SWIG does, how it fits into the SASE framework, and why it's important today?
Yeah, so the SWIG is a Secure Web Gateway. So there's kind of two different approaches. A Secure Web Gateway is a forward proxy. And so a forward proxy says, I want to protect from the inside out. So I have users and I want to protect them from whatever's happening on the web. Versus a firewall where I have a perimeter. I'm trying to protect from things from coming from the outside in. So I'm trying to block attacks from coming outside. With the SWIG, I want to protect against attacks that might exist when my users go outside. So we build a forward proxy. We terminate the TLS session so that we can inspect the inside of the encrypted traffic. And then we can apply various security techniques, whether that's URL filtering, whether that's CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokering, whether that's data loss prevention, protecting against the loss of sensitive data like credit cards, social security numbers. Once you're able to open the encrypted data and inspect it, you can make sure that as your users are accessing these applications that live elsewhere on the cloud, you're not leaking sensitive data and you're not opening yourself up to attacks that are happening out there on the internet.
All right, and I think one of the interesting aspects of the pandemic was the rise of user-directed attacks. Right, you had talked about that. In fact, I talked to one of the people that I know pretty well that does all he does is penetration testing now, and he said in 100% of the companies that hire him can penetrate. 90% of the time, it's through user creds and things like that, through web-based applications. Right, so we can companies pour billions of dollars into protecting the network. But if they're not protecting those the web, they're actually leaving maybe the biggest hole open. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as more and more things shift to the web, this becomes more and more prevalent for all of our organizations.
Yeah, so it sounds like SWIG has shifted from something that a handful of companies have to something that should be as ubiquitous as a firewall. Really, there's no reason to not deploy it. Yeah, now I know VMware, one of the things that prides itself on is being an open vendor, and that's one of the big changes you brought to the network industry and in the security industry. So in addition to your own SWIG, you actually partner with others, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, you talked about the evolution of our networking story here at VMware, and that open ecosystem has been a part of it from the beginning. So with NSX, bring us any underlay in the data center, we'll build an overlay on top and make it run better. With VMware SD-WAN, bring us any underlay across the WAN and we'll build an overlay on top and make it work better. With our edge network intelligence, bring us any LAN technology you have for wireless and switching, and we'll do monitoring on top to make the experience better. And so we wanted to take the same approach with SASE. Of course, intrinsic security, we're building our own security solutions, and there's a lot of things that we can do when we bring things together under a single pane of glass. But we recognize that security is a subject that people feel very emotionally attached to their security vendors sometimes and have long-standing relationships. And I joke about, we talk about zero trust security all the time, but you better trust someone, right? You better trust the person who's providing you security. So it's not really zero trust. And so when folks have those trusted vendors, we want to continue that VMware open ecosystem model and continue to work with them. A great example of this is Zscaler. We announced a deeper partnership last year at VMworld. We're actually doing cloud-to-cloud direct development to integrate our clouds together. So if you want a SASE solution, but you want to leverage VMware for the WAN edge and Zscaler for the security services edge, you can do that. If you want to leverage VMware on both sides, you can do that as well, built on top of the same platform.
Yeah, and I guess the Fox Mulder model of trust no one doesn't work in security. You're right. You do got to trust somebody sometimes. So, although I understand from the security pros perspective, before I was an analyst, I was in IT. It would, I would raise my eyebrows sometimes at some of the vendors, but that's neither here nor there. Now, the base functionality of a SWIG is pretty basic, right? It's very well standardized. I think what I was reading about yours is you add some analytics to it, and I've always actually thought that analytics was something that was missing from the Gartner definition of SASE. And so can you describe what the analytics does and why they're important to buyers?
Yeah, and I think, everyone likes to talk about machine learning and analytics, and it's like a buzzword. And I don't think we're at the point yet where it's the primary mechanism for securing your network. But it's, as the icing on the cake, as we call it, it's really important to be able to detect anomalous behavior that's going on in the network and react to it. And, if you think about a true SASE solution, a true end-to-end zero trust solution, in the ideal case, I have a user device that's managed, let's say by Workspace ONE from VMware. I have an EDR solution running on that device, let's say Carbon Black from VMware, that's protecting me against threats on the device. I'm going across a secure network to, let's say, a SWIG to access my internet application. And that means every step along the way, I know that the device is safe. I know that the user is authorized. I know the network is secure. And I know that the application is not doing anything malicious. Well, in the modern world, I can't secure every step of the way. I can't always put an agent on the device. Maybe it's a user's bring your own device. Maybe it's an IoT device where I literally can't install something. Maybe it's a new application that we haven't developed significant signatures for. And so we layer analytics on top of everything else that we're doing from a traditional security perspective to try to catch some of those issues. A great example we have from our Edge Network Intelligence product is we had mobile X-ray carts in a hospital that suddenly one of the carts started reaching out to DNS servers and other servers in Eastern Europe that it had never accessed before. And our system not only detected that this was new behavior, but it detected that both the X-ray carts in this hospital, as well as in other hospitals where we had identified similar devices by analyzing their behavioral patterns, weren't doing the same thing. And so we quarantine the device, we bring it to the IT department's attention, and turns out that X-ray cart was infected with malware. And we were able to identify that just by looking at the behavior of the system and see that it's different. Now, of course, that's easy to do for IoT because they're very predictable. It gets a little bit harder to do for people because we can be unpredictable at times. But even there, knowing the hours someone normally works, knowing the offices and locations that they usually work from, we layer those behavioral analytics on top to try to detect other things that might go wrong that don't match, an anti-malware signature, that aren't caught explicitly by DLP or CASB or other security techniques. And so we think that's a really important layer to add on top of your security. I know XDR is a big subject that you love to talk about. And,
I love XDR.
And really, it's getting all of these different types of data together and being able to make sense of them. Really something machines are good at, right? It's really hard for us humans to process all of this data coming from all of these different places.
Yeah, in hindsight, I should have started using the term ZDR or something. And I had actually heard a similar story from a school system where their connected thermostat actually was trying to access BitTorrent. And what they had realized was a student had hijacked the IP address, and if it weren't for analytics. And it's interesting that you say that that's not a hard problem to solve. In an individual case, it's not hard to solve. But you think of the expansion of IoT and how many more IoTs are being driven. In fact, when I talk to companies about hybrid work, we're talking about temperature scanners and environmental sensors and even like mobile cleaning robots and things like that to sanitize the rooms. We are going to see an explosion of the number of devices connected. And if security pros think they're challenged today, I mean, just wait a year. And boy, you said you don't think machine learning is the primary way we'll protect our networks. When do you think that'll be? Because I actually think that's closer than most people realize. Yeah,
I mean, I think we're getting there. I think with with IoT, you mentioned the proliferation of IoT. Also, folks are becoming more and more attached to their personal devices. And I think we see huge companies who say we want to go 100% BYOD in the next 5 years. Let people choose whatever they want and just access their corporate network from their own device. And again, if we get there and we start taking away some of that endpoint security and other things, then being able to shift that intelligence and use pattern matching and other things to detect that something's going wrong on those devices is going to be critical. So I think, in the next 5 years, we'll start to see the primary application of machine learning, at least in some avenues, for securing networks.
Yeah, one CISO I spoke to, she described the problem really well, where she said finding threats used to be like finding a needle in a haystack. Today, it's like finding a needle in a stack of needles, right? It has gotten exponentially more difficult because everything looks the same, right? So,
everything's encrypted, and people are incentivized to attack now, right? I mentioned cryptocurrency briefly earlier, but hacking used to be like something you did for disruption to cause chaos, right? And now with the rise of cryptocurrency, suddenly it's really easy to get remunerated for doing things. We've seen this huge explosion of ransomware attacks because it's not traceable the way that a cash payment would have been. And so so people are incentivized in a different way. And so we're seeing a lot of new attacks, and we've given them a much bigger surface to attack.
Well, all I can say is I'm glad I'm no longer doing corporate IT, because that's a much more difficult job today. So anyways, Craig Connors, we're coming up to the end. I do want to ask you one more question. You are a thought leader, and I do like to ask for some practical advice for people watching that are interested in SASE. And my data shows the interest in SASE is off the charts, but deployments are still pretty low because we're still trying to learn it. Give us a couple of things, after people watch this video, what should they do next to prepare themselves for SASE?
Right. So I think SASE is about securing the modern network. That is the proliferation of applications being distributed everywhere, the proliferation of devices being distributed everywhere, and the fact that we're going to have this mix of secure devices and insecure devices, secure locations and insecure locations. And so when you're evaluating these SASE solutions, when you're talking to SASE vendors, you really want to look at both your current and future requirements. What does my horizon look like for adopting IoT? What does my horizon look like for adopting different cloud technologies, adopting microservice-based containerized applications? And how is this security solution going to evolve with me? One of the things I like to say is that the pandemic taught us, if nothing else, it taught us that things can change a lot faster than we ever thought they could. And it might not be a pandemic that causes the next major rapid shift. It could be a vulnerability in a protocol. Let's say somebody cracks AES tomorrow, right? Then suddenly we've got a big problem in the world, and we're going to have to pivot very quickly, right? And so one of the big things that these cloud-based tools provide is the agility to scale quickly, to pivot quickly. And so you want to consider not just how your network is architected today, but how you plan to go in the future. And is this a solution that can grow and evolve with you as you get there?
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice, because I still hear arguments against wanting to keep a lot of security on-prem and looking at the capabilities the same. But the one thing you don't get on-prem is that level of cloud scale and elasticity that you get from SASE. And that becomes important when you do have to do things like scale up and scale down really, really quickly, right? So I think that's probably the word of warning. And as far as cracking the AES goes, all the bad guys are using quantum now, right? So we may not be that far away.
We may not be that far away. That's right.
So anyways, Craig, it was a delight to have you. Congratulations on the launch of your Swig. Thanks for joining me. And if you're watching this, please click to subscribe on my YouTube channel. And again, thanks for having me. And I'll see you guys next week.